Many years ago, I worked for a company that hired an unbelievably incompetent financial director. When the leadership first decided to get things in order to be honest, this story is more about my boss than about me. We had a travel team, a group of volunteers from the sales and IT departments who traveled together with equipment and technicians to set up demonstration booths and build connections at trade shows. Some shows were held in big cities, and you could attend events hosted by suppliers, go to parties, and hang out with salespeople who, for some reason, were mostly cheerful booze enthusiasts. We had something like a seniority system for who got to go on trips, but no one really complained, and everyone got their turn. You went to DevCon last year. Now it's my turn. Okay, fair enough. The travel team coordinator was also a volunteer role, but it was usually someone higher up, like a manager. They handled organizational tasks, equipment shipping, rentals, expenses, trip plans, and paying for booth spaces. They also got a ton of free swag from our partners' sales departments, which they later shared with the team. It was a kind of bonus for all participants. But when the new financial director came in, she introduced a bunch of harsh new rules. Some of them were as follows: the team couldn't get expense reimbursements without company approval. By the way, no one got approval after trips anymore. The team wasn't allowed to have its own credit card or even a corporate one. Instead, they were given gift cards with a fixed amount like $150 to cover all expenses. Unfortunately, the places we needed to use them, airlines, car rentals, hotels, gas stations, toll roads, didn't accept gift cards. The finance department denied they were gift cards and even banned mentioning the word gift card in meetings. We were told to call them pre-approved credit balances or something like that. But for the rest of the world, they were 100% regular gift cards with the same restrictions. Next, no matter how early you requested approval for something, the finance department almost always delayed until the last minute, usually after a dozen reminders leading to extra costs, expedited shipping, same-day rental penalties, inflated airfare prices. If they forgot to do something, it was your fault or your manager's fault because you didn't remind them enough. Reminded them 4 times to buy plane tickets for the team, but they didn't do it. You should have reminded them 5 times, so it's your fault. And all this was because of the financial director's claim that these measures would reduce fraud, even though we'd never had any fraud. Her approach was straight out of Dolores Umbridge from Harry Potter. God forbid someone somewhere might indulge in something extra. She was a smug, condescending jerk with a self-satisfied smirk, annoyingly shaking her head while explaining things. So we'll call her Dolores. To her, the travel team just stapled receipts and got reimbursed. Dolores shut that down, claiming the team coordinator was just blowing money on steaks and wine. Naturally, he told her to go to hell and quit. In his absence, Dolores framed all the supplier gifts as a blatant example of theft and freeloading, which she supposedly put an end to. Oh, behold the great swindler sitting on a throne of stress balls from Airbnb Express and free catalogs. In the end, those duties fell to my manager. He'd never been on these trips and didn't really know how things worked, so he didn't challenge Dolores until he went on a trip with the team himself. He was shocked that he had no expense account or corporate card. When he asked, they gave him a gift card. He tried using it, and it didn't work almost anywhere except at some restaurants. Everything else he paid for with his personal American Express card, including expenses for the entire team, and was denied reimbursement because he didn't get prior approval. He was out over $40,000 for a 2-week trip. Of course, he complained to upper management. Dolores threatened to quit if they didn't let her do her job, and the top executives who hadn't dealt with her before acted pretty spinelessly, not wanting to be the bad guys. Well, she says you can use gift cards, they said. When my manager explained that they were rejected everywhere, Dolores said he just didn't try hard enough. He's afraid of conflict. He needs to be a big boy and stand up for his rights. In the end, under pressure from lawyers, management reimbursed him. After that, Dolores arranged for certain things to be paid in advance: hotels, tickets, truck rentals, shipping. But everything was done at the last minute. For example, hotel rooms or cars were booked on the day a major event started, so naturally everything was already taken or they booked the wrong hotel. Washington, D.C. is not Washington State, or a package that could have been shipped for $40 was sent for $250 because they delayed until the last minute. The finance department also had no idea how much anything actually cost, or how we saved money by doing things ourselves. Sometimes everything was a mess. The team arrived at a hotel only to find out the finance department hadn't entered payment details, like for a security deposit, which almost every hotel requires, and no one could reach them. So once again, expenses fell on employees' personal cards. And again, Dolores said they just shouldn't believe what the hotel clerk trade show, union, or some minimum wage toll booth guy says. They need to fight. We're not here to babysit people who are afraid of conflict. Have you ever argued with a toll booth worker on a New Jersey turnpike? Neither had she. After two such disasters, my manager said, "Enough. No one's volunteering for these events anymore. I won't approve time off for this." He refused to be the trip coordinator in the future because he simply couldn't afford it. It was an unpopular decision, to put it mildly, but he told us, just wait, let her do things her way. He was a master of passive-aggressive sabotage, and without resistance, Dolores shifted into fifth gear with her smug smirk. Now we'll operate like a real company. And that led to the next problem. Some trips were to major cities like Chicago, New York, D.C., and so on. Dolores started whining that everyone was rushing to these places for a corporate-funded bender. Management weakly countered, "Well, yeah, otherwise we won't have volunteers." But that didn't satisfy Dolores, so she decided to introduce a lottery among employees. Anyone could apply to go on a trip, and she'd supposedly randomly select who went to keep things fair. This fairness, by the way, suspiciously often favored her own subordinates, but we'll get to that. The whole point of these shows wasn't to take a vacation, as Dolores always claimed. She never understood why we went in the first place: to grow the business. IT staff needed to go to set up and configure equipment, and salespeople needed to network. But that idea never sank into her brain. Since the very IT specialists and technicians who were now banned from going didn't want to pay for everything themselves, we simply stopped volunteering. As a result, random employees from other departments who had no clue how to work at a trade show, how to behave, or what to do started getting picked for the team. And it turned into a disaster. Imagine a marketing assistant from the fifth floor wins a trip and suddenly learns she has to pay for everything out of pocket. Plus, Dolores always sent one of her own people to supervise the team. But they also didn't know how trade shows worked. They only knew how to nod along to Dolores and tolerate her control freak tendencies. What's a union fee? What's a corkage fee? No, we didn't approve any union to connect our electricity. Just plug the booth cord into the outlet. They won't let us. Who are they? Well, we don't need to use screens in the booth. We're not selling TVs. Did you know that if you have a conflict with a trade show venue's union and refuse their services, they still bill you, but at the maximum rate? Yeah, Dolores and her team didn't know that either. And trust me, paying those guys a couple thousand up front is way cheaper than paying fines later. She tried to fight them, of course, because she wasn't afraid of conflict, but she lost spectacularly. The irony is that despite all her claims to the contrary, the non-IT, non-salespeople who did go actually treated it like a company-funded vacation, just as she feared. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. At first they were shocked they had to work, but once word got around, No one else applied for the lottery, so there were no more volunteers at all. Then Dolores started sending interns. You could write a whole novel about that nightmare. Imagine sending a bunch of college students to Vegas, telling them they have to pay for everything, and putting them in work conditions where they're guaranteed to fail. I'm sure plenty of laws were broken then. After that, Dolores started sending chaperones again, her lackeys from the finance department. As a result, the company racked up huge fines for all sorts of violations, including deposits for interns. Interns got into trouble so often that Dolores started hiring floor monitors at hotels. Grown adults had to work all day on their feet at trade shows, then report back to their rooms. She even put 4 to 6 people in a single room like it was a high school band trip. She bought breathalyzers to make sure no one drank. That's how she treated grown adults. The sales department called it a PR disaster, and my boss said, "Wait, just wait. Let her drown herself." In the first year, travel expenses skyrocketed by over 4,000%. You heard that right, 4,000%. Trips that used to cost $3,600 now cost $144,000 or more, mostly due to fines and rush fees. Annual expenses went from $110,000 to over $2.1 million because of the total chaos. We lost a ton of booked booths and the rights to renew them, meaning we lost half our trade shows and looked like idiots in front of clients. The whole point of attending these shows was networking, so going there no longer made sense. The sales department pointed this out to Dolores multiple times, but she just doubled down. A year later, she canceled the travel team entirely. Finally, management stepped in. They battled with Dolores for a whole year until she left for personal reasons or to spend time with her family. It took almost 2 years to rebuild the team from scratch. People got corporate cards again, the travel coordinator role became a full-time paid position, and when we hired a new person for it, they took on all financial responsibilities. Things got much better, and in the first year they saved the company a ton of money. There was universal rejoicing. Here are some edits based on popular questions. Why wasn't she fired when expenses went from $110,000 to $2.1 million? There were several reasons, but the main one is she was the financial director. I think she smoothed over all the mistakes in her reports. Plus, we had great years in the early 2000s. If we made $2 million one year and $3 million the next, the losses might have gone unnoticed until someone realized we should have made $6 million. That's my theory based on what happened later. Dolores cozied up to 2 top executives, and rumor has it she had a heart-to-heart with them about the company's financial state, which is how she got hired for a second year. Several directors quit, including friends of management who later invited us for drinks and spilled all the dirt. The trade show issues were just one of her screw-ups. She also botched a key supply channel, dumped the market, made a few enemies, nearly destroyed the company, and handed competitors some of our most profitable supplier contracts, violating an antitrust agreement. There was a lot more, but it involves specific people, so I can't share. What happened with the Christmas party wasn't particularly interesting, or rather it just didn't happen. This was toward the end of the whole saga. Now we'll operate like a real company, she said. But as soon as the travel budget ballooned from $110,000 to $2.1 million, the party apparently fell to the bottom of her priority list. I'm not even sure she knew it needed to happen. Some think she funneled money from there to cover the massive trade show screw-ups. But I doubt the budgets came from the same source. Around November, people started asking, "Don't we have a New Year's party every year?" But no one knew who was even in charge. Usually 3 employees who'd left the company the previous year largely because of Dolores handled it. They didn't organize it themselves, but hired contractors, and it took place at some fancy hotel. Our fiscal year runs from January to December, so December is a crunch time across the board. For Dolores, it was her first full fiscal year. She started at the end of the previous one, so finances were already a mess. How was she fired? She just made too many enemies in the company. It took some time, but after a year and a half, she'd built up so much resentment that she couldn't move in any direction. There was massive passive resistance, which finally threw her off balance. She tried to stage some kind of internal coup, which no one supported, and by the time 2 years had passed since she joined, she was, to put it mildly, not in her right mind. She started taking creative leave until one became permanent. Her assistant temporarily took her place, but was later fired too. Then they brought in a consulting group that created a new finance department. They were the ones who suggested making the travel coordinator a full-time paid role. The woman we hired for it was absolutely amazing. Did she really try to sell company merch? Dolores was shocked that we gave away stickers, pens, t-shirts, and flashlight keychains for free at trade shows. Company assets, she called them. She demanded we charge at least a symbolic fee for them. As far as I know, no one followed that order. I clearly remember her sending a memo ranting that too many keychains were missing, and she saw them on employees' desks. They cost the company money. She wanted to charge employees $3 each. Rumor has it she wanted to charge trade show visitors too. The next story: my boss secretly wanted to fire me and have me train my replacement. But I was warned about his plans. Bob, my then boss, an older guy, clueless about tech, but a longtime company veteran, which is why he became my boss. Hans, the hero of this story, my high school friend, works at the same company but in a different department in management. He helped me get hired here 4 years ago. Carolina A., colleague, not exactly a star, but gets by with effort. Carl A., regular employee with the company for about 6 years, mostly handles old clients. He's got a family always busy. I'm a guy in his late 20s, a bit of a nerd, love computers. Our company was small, and our team of 3 was something like tech support for clients, but with expanded duties. I usually help set up databases and sometimes advise clients on whether switching tariffs was worth it, for example. Like any tech support, we got client tickets and handled them one by one. I like complex tasks and worked hard on them. As it turned out, Carolina preferred more standard tasks. She liked doing what she already knew instead of tackling something new every day. Nothing wrong with that. We worked well together and had unwritten rules about who took which tickets, and everyone won me, Carolina, the company, and the client. But then we got a new boss, Bob, and he immediately noticed I was processing fewer tickets than Carolina. I tried to explain that not all tickets are equal in effort, but since he didn't really understand text, he didn't get half of what I did. About a month later, we landed a huge new client, and I spent a week at their office setting up databases and everything they needed. Because of that, my monthly ticket averages dropped even more. Well, obviously right, if Bob had even one functioning neuron, he'd have figured it out himself. Then he dropped something I didn't expect. He said we needed help, and that he'd gotten approval to hire a 4th team member. I was thrilled, as were the others. We had this new big client, and the company was growing fast. It all sounded logical. He even specifically asked me to handle candidate selection and train the new hire, probably because he realized he had no idea what we did. I was fine with it. That same day, Hans called me, which was weird because he usually texts, not calls. He said, "Come over tomorrow. I've got some beer that urgently needs company." The next day, I went to his place and we just chatted about life. We see each other about once a month and have a lot of mutual friends, but this time it was just the 2 of us, no group. We drank beer, and after a couple of bottles, he said he'd updated his resume recently, and that everyone should keep an updated one handy. He asked, "Do you have an updated one?" I immediately sensed something was up and said, "No." "Why do I need one?" "Do you know something you want to share?" He replied, "I'm just saying you should always have a resume ready. But I can't say Bob's planning to fire you. And I can't say he's not planning to fire you. I thanked him for the beer and left soon after. So I realized they were going to fire me, and Bob had probably just asked me to hire my replacement, train them to do my job, and then hand over my position. That's where the sweet moment of malicious compliance kicked in. I fully followed the order to hire a fourth team member and picked someone who perfectly matched Bob's idea of a good fit, someone who'd process the maximum number of tickets. In other words, I looked for a not very smart person with a careless attitude who didn't give a damn about clients. After all, when Bob talked about my tickets, he didn't care at all about client satisfaction. There were tons of applications for the vacancy. Some were good, but I screened them out immediately. I chose resumes with lots of mistakes and minimal experience in the field. Those were the people I invited for interviews. The interview stage was trickier because now Bob and someone from HR were sitting next to me, but I asked most of the questions and gave my opinions on candidates. Since I'd already filtered out the good ones, Bob picked the best of the worst, and in my opinion, not even the best of them. One candidate was pretty decent, but I asked him pointless questions, and when he couldn't answer, I made him look like a complete idiot. Sorry, John. I nudged Bob toward one candidate who he ended up choosing because he'll work fast and process tons of tickets. By then, I'd already secured a new job that started in 4 months, but I wanted Bob to fire me himself for that sweet severance package. After 2 months of training Mr. Newbie, I only taught him basic tickets. He handled them quickly, but made tons of mistakes and complex tasks just piled up in the queue. Carl noticed this since he'd be the only one able to pick them up after I left. I let him in on my plan. As if on cue, he'd just gotten an offer from another company. Carl couldn't stand Bob either and decided he'd accept the offer, but could wait a couple of weeks to quit right after me for maximum impact. Then I told Bob I'd finished training the newbie, and a week later he tells me with regret that he has to fire me because my performance hasn't improved. He actually complained that I processed too few tickets while training someone else. Really, Bob. He even wished me luck finding a new job with my work ethic. That was the day I'd been waiting for. I just thanked Bob and reminded him I was now entitled to 4 months severance plus 2 months of unused vacation, which also had to be paid out. As I was leaving, I told Carl, and he opened his desk drawer, pulled out a signed 2-week resignation letter, and headed to Bob's office. My girlfriend had some vacation time left, and we decided to jet off to New Zealand for 4 weeks the following week. That's where I proposed to her. A month after returning from New Zealand, I started my new job with a raise and a great boss. I thanked Hans again for the heads up, and he kept me posted on how my old department rapidly fell apart. Later, Bob got fired too. When that happened, they even offered me his position, but I declined, though it would have been the perfect moment. About 5 years later last year, Hans and I started our own company. We're doing roughly the same thing, but in a different city, and so far everything's going great. Well, that's the end of the stories. I'm waiting for your opinions on them in the comments. Maybe you have similar stories too. Thanks for watching this video to the end. Check out our previous video, which you'll see here, and good luck to you.